There are pieces of a puzzle that are found in each one of the four Gospels. That one Gospel brings up a puzzle piece and the other Gospel answers. And sometimes this Gospel brings up the puzzle piece and this Gospel answers. And when you look at this, you realize that these are four eyewitness accounts that couldn't have been invented. There's no way they could have invented these accounts. Here's why. Lying just below the surface of the New Testament narrative is an elaborate series of interlocking puzzle pieces that reveal that the New Testament documents contain independent eyewitness testimony of actual historical events. Because details in one writer's account inadvertently, they're like passing details, inadvertently fill in the gaps of another writer's account. So when you compare the accounts, you see how puzzling statements and events are resolved to reveal a more complete picture of what actually happened. When you put all the puzzle pieces together, you can see the picture. And that's one reason we have four accounts. As we'll see later, if it was just one account, inevitably we'd be missing some details. And of course, four independent accounts are more trustworthy than just one. Because if you just have one, who knows if the guy's lying? But if you have four independent accounts telling basically the same core story with varying details, you go, this really happened. Now, years ago, I mentioned J.J. Blunt. He was a Cambridge professor and also a pastor. He wrote a book on what he called undesigned coincidences in the text. What we're about to show you are called undesigned coincidences. I don't like that phrase because it doesn't really mean anything. I like to call it elaborate testimony. But you'll see as we go through this. And we're going to go through so much of this that in a couple of days, if you want this PowerPoint presentation, if you go to this website, crossexamine.org/TV, and put your email address in, I'm going to email you this particular PowerPoint presentation in PDF form. That goes for all the people watching online too. So just go to that website. All right, let's do a bunch of these because they're extremely interesting. And they show, without any doubt in my mind, that these are independent eyewitness accounts. Let's start with Jesus and Pilate. Jesus and Pilate. Jesus is actually accused of sedition. And if you go to Luke, he leaves a puzzle. Here's what he says. The Jews accused Jesus before Pilate. We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar and saying that he himself is Christ the King. And Pilate asked him, are you the King of the Jews? And Jesus answered him, you have said so. Then Pilate said to the chief priests and crowds, I find no guilt in this man. Now, does anyone see anything puzzling about this? What's puzzling about it? The charge is brought before him. Pilate asks, is it true? Jesus says yes. And then he says, you're not guilty. Does anyone see anything puzzling about this? Yeah. Yeah, well, it seems like he did. You have said so. He didn't deny it, right? Well, if you weren't, wouldn't you deny it? Wouldn't you say, no, I'm not the king of the Jews? Right? Yeah. Right? He at least didn't deny it. So my question is, why did he find him not guilty? At least he would have said, well, you need to answer it directly, right? Because Jesus didn't deny it. Now, this is puzzling, right? You just look at Luke's account and you go, what's going on here? Well, John actually answers. He has the missing puzzle piece that solves Luke. If you read John's version, it says, Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, are you the King of the Jews? Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. Pilate went back outside to the Jews and told them, I find no guilt in him. Do you see the conclusion Pilate came to? What's the conclusion he came to? Yeah, he's a king, but he's not a king that's going to threaten me. He's not a king that's going to threaten Caesar, because that was their charge. And so he said, well, I find no guilt in this man. If you've got a problem with him, you handle him. Now, you wouldn't know that if you just read Luke. But when you read John, John fills in the missing puzzle piece. Now, this tells me that these are two independent eyewitness accounts that contain different details. When you did your 9/11, you contained certain details that you did include. And you included certain details that you didn't include, and vice versa, right? We all had different details. And when you put the stories together, we get a more complete picture. Not a totally complete picture. There's no account that has every detail, right? There's no account that could. But a more complete picture. So the bottom line is when you have these 4 Gospels here, John actually solves Luke. Now let's take a look at another one. This is Herod Antipas. He was called a fox by Jesus. Now this is the guy that beheaded John the Baptist and also the guy that tried Jesus. Remember, they brought Jesus before Herod. Well, there was a Herod the Great who died in 4 BC. So he dies about the time Jesus is born. After he dies, his kingdom is broken up. And one of his sons got part of the kingdom. This guy, Herod Antipas. So when you read Herod in the Bible, most of the time it's one of these guys. Although early on, Matthew says Herod the Great, that's his father. But this is the guy that dealt with John the Baptist and dealt with Jesus. And Jesus called him a fox. Now the question is, how does Matthew know what that fox is saying privately? Why? Notice in Matthew, he says that at that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus, and he said to his servants, this is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work in him. So Herod turns to his servants and says, this guy Jesus, he's John the Baptist just raised from the dead. Now, what's the puzzle?
How did he hear what the servant said?
That's right, Josh. How does he know, how would Matthew know what Herod said to his servants? Now, you could say, well, God revealed it to him, right? Of course, you could say that, but you don't even need to go there. Why not? Because another writer has the missing puzzle piece. If you go to Luke, Luke says, and the 12 were with Jesus. This is a totally unrelated passage. It has nothing to do with Herod, really. It has nothing to do with this instance. The 12 were with Jesus, and certain women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary called Magdalene, out of whom had come 7 demons. Gee, there's a great eyewitness for you, right? And Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's steward. And Susanna and many others who provided for him from their substance. So one of the women following Jesus, who also had Matthew following him, was the wife of Herod's steward. So do you think that Joanna maybe told Matthew, this is what Herod is saying? Makes sense, right? But you wouldn't know that by just reading Matthew. So now, not only do you have John affirming Luke, now you've got Luke solving Matthew. All right? Let's do another one. Why do you keep the transfiguration quiet? What goes on with the transfiguration? Anyone know the story of the transfiguration?